And hello everyone, welcome back to PER2202 Athletic Development Across the Lifespan, and welcome to week 2 of semester 2. Today we're just going to briefly have a look at some of the different models that are used for athletic development. Primarily this semester we'll be focusing on the Canadian model of long-term athletic development, which is the one that has provided the stages for your first assessment. Once again, we'll just have a quick share screen and we'll just quickly go through this, guys. So hopefully we are all seeing this now. Yes, great. Yeah, we're just looking at athletic development through the lifespan and development models. Primarily, I'll just introduce you to our primary one, which is the Canadian model of long-term athletic development. Here on the side that we can see that there's a range of them, starting at the bottom from active start. Now that's 0 to 6. Predominantly we're not really going to focus on that or look at that one, but it's good to understand that things such as physical literacy and teaching kids that gross motor skill starts at the very early age. From an exercise or a training or a coaching professional point of view, we're really not going to deal too much in that 0 to 6 age. If you were to go into preschool teaching, then having an awareness of that would be important. We'll generally come into it looking at it from the fundamentals, which is that 6 to 9. That's early school from kindergarten, first class, second class, and looking at the primary roles there. We'll go over this over the next few weeks. Then advances to the learn to train. Then we get into train to train, and we're entering adolescence and teenage years. Learning to train, training to train. Training to compete. This is our first stage of high-level performance, and predominantly in various sports. This is where elite players will enter into academies and development squads. Whereas those who aren't, they'll maintain and they'll go into this maintaining a level of activity that we hope to make it inclusive in their entire life. Train to win, predominantly that's looking at our full-time professional athlete, our Olympic athletes, elite level, national, international, professional. And we will always end up into this active for life. And it's looking at the transition from each stage along the ways. Now, this is the age brackets are given as a general cue because there are sports such as gymnastics, tennis, swimming, which are early specialization. And they sort of they follow this guide, but whereas here we're doing fundamentals and learning to train, say in gymnastics, by the time they get this training to compete, they're moving more into the era or area of retirement from the sport. So they sort of block it down and they start a lot earlier. So the primary aim, though, of this model is to produce greater number of performers who are capable of achieving high results, whereas our original model of the pyramid shape was developing elite athletes. And if you weren't an elite athlete, there really wasn't much awareness or focus on what to do. Whereas here we're looking at, yes, let's have a pathway for elite development, but also make sure those that don't fall within the elite, whether it be to genetic skill acquisition or just their own motivation, that we still cater for those athletes. The main thing to look at this when we talk about stages is that each athlete will pass through this stage, and depending on what stage they're at, they're open to certain training acquisitions, those things that they can complete and can improve on. So one of the principles of the long-term athletic development, or LTADs, the 10-year practice rule, it's come out that it takes around 10,000 hours of practice to become an elite athlete, or to master any skill, language, musical instrument, whatever. So as you can see, 10,000 hours, that is a great deal. Now, it's not, say if you want an elite rugby league player or an elite AFL or basketball player, about having them do 10,000 hours of that sport. Because remember, in the early years, there's a lot of physical literacy and developing the fundamental skills, where it's getting them to compete and play in a various amount of different activities to help that roundedness. So all that comes into it. So it's 10,000 hours, but it's not necessarily 10,000 hours of specific practice in a specific sport. That we have natures and stages of development that are central to consideration. But there's difference in the nature of sports. Some sports are more in tune to early development or early specialisation. Others have a longer thing. And the sports in themselves may change. Prior to Tiger Woods and the current crop of young golfers, predominantly it was viewed that golf, or at the elite level of golf, at the top level, that the main era for you to excel was between 35 and 45. And for that, there was the general practice, but it was also a psychological thing, that you needed this strong mental skill to be able to cope. It was only with the Tiger Woods, and then all of a sudden it's carried on. For Australia, when we look at Adam Scott, Jason Day, and Bads, and the other golfers, that we suddenly realised, oh, hang on, Jordan Spieth, Rory McIlroy, that they're coming in younger now. And a lot of that is more that they're starting a lot younger in life, and they're developing these psychological skills. Fundamental skills, physical literacy gained in early what is vital. So in other words, if in those early years, if you don't develop this physical literacy or these competencies, they're lost. The easiest way to explain this is, if you ever tried to learn a new language once you hit adolescence, say you were 15 or 16, perhaps you're exposed to having to learn French at school, and how hard it is for you to pick up words and vocabulary. But if you go back and think how many words you picked up from the age of 2 to 6 as a young child. So we can look at it that way. So you remember, oh, well, yeah, by the end of it, I had all these words. I was still talking like a baby, but you knew and understood and were able to apply these words. Whereas now it becomes quite difficult to learn the language. So you can see how that fundamental skills and physical literacy and why it is vital to learn in those early years. And also the other concept we need to understand is that there are particular windows that are more suitable to train children at various stages, or any athlete. At this age, it's critical that they develop this gross motor skill. Then at this age, they learn game patterns or psychological profiling and those sorts of things. And understanding that when they occur for your sport is paramount to help the athlete achieve the most. Now again, LTAD, it's probably as I said, it's the one we're focusing on, but it's not the only one out there. And in your lit review, I'm more than happy for you to come out with contrasting views and to challenge the benefits of this. In uni, it's not merely sitting there, oh yes, this is what he told us, so therefore we must agree with him. I love people who want to challenge what they're told. This is what critical analysis is, and critical thought is what we want you to achieve in university. So in saying that, we look at other models as well. What have we got here? Adaptations to training and optimal trainability. Now that is a real mess looking at that. So as you can see, basically, you've got your chronological age and what you're capable of developing. Here is where we have our stages. Here's our windows of trainability between roughly 11 to 17. That's going to vary based on whether you're a male or female and what your sport is. Physical development, mental and cognitive development, emotional development, and we can have a look at various areas and what is available. That's quite complex, and perhaps you're not going to be examined on it, but in your own time, have a bit of a look at it. Another one we've got is our development model of sports participation. What we look at with sports participation is not just the sport itself, but the training patterns and the influences from their social interaction is. And it's about more psychological development. Whereas we focus a lot of physical literacy, we also need to understand the concept of the psychological, because especially with children, adolescents, juveniles, and young athletes, they talk about understanding the concept and how their coping strategies. And they have 3 trajectories that they're going to focus on. And predominantly they look at recreational, elite through sampling, and elite through specialisation. And one of the things that we like to mention about this sort of thing is when we talk about recreational participation through sampling, you think you get young kids, they all have a go and just try whatever they want. Generally young kids will gravitate to what they're good at. That may change over the years. There may be some influence from their friends that they hang out with and why they play that. But when they find a particular sport, they'll gravitate to that. And that's where you can get elite performance through sampling. It's all right to sit there and be a Tiger Woods and have your parent drive and direct you. Everything is to be golf, but we can risk motivational burnout and or just lack of interest in athletes. If you were to think that at 18 you're been playing the same sport for 16 years, it could be quite an emotional and a cognitive drain upon you. So with elite recreate performance through sampling is what they sort of direct, is having young athletes or young children sample a lot of sports. They'll gravitate to what they like to, and maybe they will be identified by their young coaches that they have an innate ability, or their work ethic develops this innate ability, and that leads them to going into elite development. Whereas there's also elite performance through specialization. And this is very early on when they are directed through. Now, some sports such as gymnastics particularly, it is early specialization. They get in and at the age of 5, they're already training and developing for Olympic championships. There are others, and young kids, you quite often you'll see young parents, and especially in countries that are lower socioeconomic, there will be a drive for them, whether it be India and cricket, Brazil and soccer, America and baseball. Each sport has a Europe with soccer as well. That young children will be exposed to a particular sport in a hope that they get onto elite development. So whereas we associate some sports as early specialisation and others not, they will take any sport and make it into an early specialisation. Doesn't mean it's incorrect, doesn't mean it's wrong. And just firsthand, I know where I live, there's it's a really multicultural mix. And I've sat there and at my son's school and his school cricket team, they have a wide range of kids who play at those from white European background to those from the subcontinent. I remember sitting there watching some kids play, and one of the other dads was there, and they were from India. And he had a video of his son back home in India when he was 4 or 5. And you're watching his technique at a batting clinic and school cricket clinic. And it was their drive because it's their national sport. Beyond any real sport. Some people say in India it is greater than their religion. And so it does have its benefits, but it also has its adverse effects. So that's what we look at with model of sport participation. So we have paths for every person, and that's what the main idea is with the model, is that we cater for the elite development, but we also cater for those who are there for recreational benefits. Now, so if you have a think of that, can you think of what sport and how you got into your particular sport or your interest? Just have a quick minute. Now, if we were face to face, you'd all be sitting there having a chat, writing that down. But I just want you to take that moment and think, how did you apply or get into your sport? Did you achieve that through early specialisation or through sampling? So you can see how it can apply to some. And then think of it for a lot of us, if we are just your recreational athletes, a lot of it could be a case of we sampled and we tried a bit, or what was convenient, what was available, what your school played. Others who are at the elite level, did you go through early performance specialisation, or were you sampling and you were directed that way? Or perhaps you were just born to be, like if you were 6'8" when you were 10 years old, chances are you're going to be playing basketball or volleyball. Why? Because you are so much taller than everyone else, and you may be a Gumby when it comes to playing soccer because your brain's a long way away from your feet. But all of a sudden you get the ball in basketball and you stand there, and all these elite soccer players who are half your size, all of a sudden you're a superstar. So that's how sampling can lead you to elite performance. And this is sort of how their model operates. We got recreational years and sampling years. So they're trying a lot of play, and they're just mucking around. They gravitate to what they enjoy, and generally that's associated with what they're good at. Whereas early specialisation, it's centering on one particular sport. And then it goes off recreational years through special investment and elite performance, or just continually maintaining a physical lifestyle. Now, the three models are the sampling, 6 to 12 years. So again, we're looking at it 6 to 9 and 9 to 12 years are the fundamentals and learning to train phases. Then they go on to the specialising phases, which similar is training to train, training to compete. And here we got training to compete, training to win. So it's similar, but it's just broken it down a lot simpler from the LTAD model. Keep with lots of deliberate play, which is what we have with junior kids these days. It's not about getting 6-year-olds to practice correct technique. It's about 6-year-olds playing and just mucking around. And through that, they develop the skill and the joy and the passion for it. Then they bring in deliberate practice, structured activities within the sport with a goal of improving performance and looking for those athletes with the natural ability or the capacity to move up into high levels of development. Now we've got psychological. Now remember, for a lot of people, and quite we've heard it, whether or not they're the choker, how people can deliver it. Some people are very good at sport; they always get out. So why is it they're perfect in the cricket nets, but not in the middle of the cricket field? And so a lot of that does come to the how we can develop our athletes, and why is it that some can develop well and others can't. How they interact with others. And this is what we want from our kids when we get into and have them play. How do they interact with each other? And with sport, we say it teaches them about they have to obey the rules, that there's consequences of not. It teaches them how to win, but also how to lose. When kids are little, they really struggle at losing. They don't like it. They have the tantrums. And they're just annoying. Personal experience, my son is a bad loser. But he's improving. He's been playing team sport the last couple of years, and they lose as much as they win. So he's learning to adapt and deal with that loss, which is a life skill. So it helps them to develop this, how to interact with other people, how not to get angry when your mate gets in your way and you lose the ball and the other team go, how you sit there and go, okay, you don't abuse him on the field. Nothing like watching eight-year-olds turn on one 8-year-old and like a lynch mob. So it does teach them how to deal with that. Then we have our biological, and remember, everyone grows differently. It isn't a linear. People have growth spurts, and understanding that at which time the biological concepts and what they can do. If you've got a young child whose cardiorespiratory system is not fully developed, there's no way we can train them for long-term endurance capacity because their physiological makeup will not allow for that. So it's been aware of these problems that will come because they develop as they grow. But it's no good training them to do something that physically they are incapable of doing at that stage of their development. When do they have their peak development? When is that growth spurt? And how can they go on to develop such a strong performance factors at which times, and understanding what those are. And then there's also looking at the social economic. You've got to be aware, because it's all right, you can have the greatest player in the world of golf, but it's very expensive, and if he comes from low socioeconomic status, he's not going to have the access to the sporting facilities, the coaching facilities, the technique, the equipment. And so in some cases, it may impact them. Or it may be the reverse. I think Jared Haynes spoke about the driving force for him to make it into the NRL was he was growing up in housing commission areas and he just wanted to get out there. So football and athletic performance was his driving factor that saw him succeed. And then you can have the opposite, someone who's born with a silver spoon in their mouth and they don't have that motivational drive. Like, why is someone who's given the best education and the best money and the best support, why is he going to go into, say, boxing where he can get head punched in? He's not going to go there. Why? I don't need to go there, because a lot of people who do boxing go there because it's their stepping stone out of poor area. And the risk of injury to the risk of the reward is balanced. So it's there. So socioeconomic background can have that impact, and it's understanding that and how that deals with it. So when we sit there and look at that sort of concepts and the models, we need to consider them across all those components of it. And whether we look at the LTAD or the developmental model or a couple of the other models that are around, they will all center on one structure. And these days the focus is allowing for everyone the greatest opportunity to participate in sport, because of the benefits, both emotionally, health, economically, to society for sport participation, to cater for those who can go on to elite, and also to cater for those who can't go on to elite, who are only there for recreational years. And as long as that is the benefit, because that's what we want. We want it to be inclusive. We want everyone to have the opportunity, but we want to allow those who have the potential or the drive to become professional footballers or professional athletes or elite level performers are given that opportunity, but also those that are not going to become professional contract players or elite athletes, for whether it be their physical, their genetics, their DNA, or just their overall motivation drive. I'm only playing sport because I just want to have fun. There's nothing wrong with that, but we need to cater for both sides of the spectrum. And that's what the development models that we look at generally focus on. How can we create the best opportunity for each and every one? And that's what we're going to look at. And over the next few weeks, yes, we're going to focus on the LTAD model, and we're going to look at it for each of the brackets from fundamentals. Till then, get on with your lit review, guys, and we'll talk soon. Remember, Phil, drop me an email or a phone call if you have any questions. And Rachel, you better be training hard in Rio. All right, guys, we'll see you next week.